It's episode 111 of the Improv London podcast. I'm your host, Stuart Moses, and this week's guest is Harry Turnbull.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Hooray.
Yeah, it's a good day.
So, you recently have been to Chicago, America, as opposed to all the other Chicagos in the world.
My mother thought I was going to Canada for a long time.
Really?
And she thought Chicago was in Canada, which is quite close. It is quite close to Canada.
But crucially not.
Crucially not in Canada.
And what were you doing there?
I was doing the IO Theatre 5-week intensive, which is, as it sounds, very intense, and it is also 5 weeks long.
I'm going to need more details than that.
Yeah. Okay, so it was the 7th of July to the 12th of August, so midsummer, in quite a hot place, very warm, and the improv, the IO Theatre is in just sort of outside downtown, and you go there every day from 11 in the morning to 5 p.m. in the afternoon, 4 days a week, not every day. You get a 3-day weekend, which is great, so you can go out and see shows and do some sightseeing. I suppose it's not that interesting for if you're an American, but if you're not an American like me, it was the first time I'd ever been to America, it was very interesting. They do things in life and in improv just a little bit differently. Not so much that it's unfamiliar or alien, but just so you notice, and it's like a bit weird.
Such as?
So none of the tax, like value-added tax, is on any of the prices, any of the shops. So you think, oh, I'm buying this $10 thing, but it turns out to be $11.50. The IO Theatre is across the road from a Whole Foods market, which is a very expensive sort of organic foods supermarket, sort of like the Waitrose of America. And the cheapest and best value item are the $3 bottles of wine.
Right.
Which were absolutely fantastic. I don't know why they were so cheap when everything else was so expensive. But I ate lunch there a lot of the time. The content of the courses is probably what people are actually more interested in, so I'll talk about them now. It's 5 weeks, so each is represents one of the 8-week courses. So there's 5 levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that you would usually do in 8 3-hour sessions once a week, but you just ram them all together and you complete them in 4 days of a week. And so it's very high intensity. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of notes being taken by everyone. And not only is it a lot of information coming at you in a short amount of time, you have very little time to reflect on what you've learned and think. So you're also encouraged to go to see as many shows as you can, because watching improv is arguably just as important as practicing it. So you can see what good improv should be and how to model that. When I say good improv, I mean what Chicago IO teachers reckon is good improv. There's even disparity amongst them, so everyone, has their own preferences and what they think is worthwhile and useful things to learn. So each week, the first week was a very back to basics. So there were people of all skill levels. So there were people like me who've been doing improv for quite some time, people who've been doing it for a couple of years, and people who had done no improv whatsoever, some people who hadn't even done any theatre at all.
Wow.
So there was a lovely little chap from China who was not only not done theatre before, he'd not done improv before, and he was also improvising in a second language.
Wow.
So, and he did fantastically.
Yeah.
So there's a very wide range of people attending, and you go through each week with them. The first week is back to basics, and second week is group finding games together, and also character work, which I thought was like a little bit of an odd pairing, because character work typically being quite individualistic, focusing on inwards towards yourself, and then also mixing that with group work, where it's less about being an individual and more, complementing what's already going on or mirroring it. The third week was two-person scene work, and this is at the core of the IO philosophy, which is the theatre of the heart, realistic scenes between two people. That's the core of it all, building relationships and understanding more about the characters that are there. So we did a lot of learning through the third week, and again it comes back to watching improv and appreciating the notes that your fellow classmates are being given when you're not actually up on stage, because with a class of 14 then you're going to be up one time in 7 for paired work. So 6 out of 7 times you need to be learning from an audience perspective. And then in week 4, that's the Herald. So the Herald is the main format that's played in the IO Theatre, and was devised by Dale Close and Shana Halpin at the IO Theatre, and it's really, really deep. People think, you might look at it and say, great, you have an opening game, then a first beat of 3 scenes, a group game, and then another second beat, and then a third game and the third beat, which brings all the threads together and ties it off nicely. You might think that's very simple just by looking at it, but there's a lot more when you get under it and really explore it, and that's why an entire week on it was very useful. And the 5th week, they do a bit more practice on the Herald, and also introduce you to a bunch of other formats, which I won't attempt to list off the top of my head. But it all culminates in a showcase where you put everything that you've learnt together with your fellow classmates. And there were 9 sections, so 9 groups of between 14 and 16 students, so roughly 110 people took the course, which is amazing.
Wow, yeah, that's huge. So how much was new and how much did you know before?
That's an interesting question. I feel like part of me knew it, or knew most of it, up until about week 3, but also there's always new bits to learn. So even in the first week, where it was very basic stuff, there are new, very intro level exercises that you just never come across before. And even just doing 3-line scenes with a fresh bunch of people coming at it from a new perspective. And also we were advised, if you have lots of experience, just pretend that you don't and go into it willing to learn everything as if you're learning it for the first time. And that really helped, because it really helped me appreciate everyone was on the same level. No one thought, I'm much better than these people, this is a waste of my time. Because even if you are learning stuff that you've already learned, you're also learning about people that you've never played with before.
Right.
And by the end of the 5 weeks, they are really good friends, and you have quite a significant bond. And that if you miss out the first chunk of that in the first week by not really sort of respecting the learning environment and being on the same level, then I think that would affect you later down the line.
That's really interesting. I hadn't ever come across that advice to, sort of forget what you know and just approach it as a beginner. That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
So you talked about group work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested in that at the moment. I know it's not quite the core thing that they do there, but could you just talk to me a little bit about the sort of thing you did in a group?
In the groups, so this was week 2, which we had with Gretchen Eng, who's a fantastic teacher. And the one thing that stuck out for me there, amongst everything else, we did an exercise called flying and falling. So it was a trust-based exercise and sort of coordination and everyone taking a role, and it involves the entire class getting up while one person tells a story of a time that they were flying, floating or falling. And at the point in the story where they begin to fly or float or fall, the entire cast, who up until this point have been sort of doing some lovely scene work, imagery sort of thing, they'll group around the person telling the story and put their hands on their back and on their legs and on their shoulders and arms and lift them above their heads up into the air. So they're about 6 or 7 feet above the ground, and it was absolutely fantastic. I really wanted to do this. There wasn't enough time to do everyone, but I really wanted to have a go because I have a fear of heights and not being in control when I am above the ground. So to be able to trust everyone to keep me safe was a really good thing and a challenge to overcome.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. You were there for a very long time. Did you never think, is this too much improv?
I didn't think it was too much improv because it was quite well spaced out. So it was a 4-day week, and you start at 11, and some people might think it's too much improv, but if you're willing to go, then you're probably the kind of person that is ready for that much improv.
Yeah.
So to you, it doesn't feel like too much improv. But if you're definitely, especially if you're from overseas and you've got to find somewhere to live and to pay for flights and to pay for the course, which in itself is $1,200. So that's like $250 a week, which is really good value, I think. If you're the kind of person that would consider doing that, then it's probably right for you.
Yeah.
It's the right level. And it's really good. It's really great to immerse yourself and not have to worry about any other things. Some people really went above and beyond. There was one gentleman, Amir Khan, who lives in Vancouver. Hi, Amir, if you listen to this. He was running his business remotely whilst also taking the course. So he was working in the mornings and on the Fridays and parts of the afternoons on the weekends. So really, really committed to also doing the improv as well.
Wow.
But for me, it was nice to not have to worry about anything else, just focus completely on that and have lines on the weekends after going to see shows every night, and just have a faff around in old Chicago town as well.
Cool. How has this experience changed you as an improviser?
I think it's changed me significantly because now I'm thinking, well, why aren't I doing improv 6 hours a day all the time? And it really has put me onto the idea that improv is the right sort of life calling for me. That sounds a bit you were sort of,
I think if someone's listening to the 111th episode of a podcast about improv, they're probably on board with those sort of statements.
Yeah. I definitely think this is like people have jobs and hobbies, and the hobby is what they really want to do with their life, and the job is for money. And some people have jobs where it was also their hobby and what they want to do with their life. And I want to try and make improv both a job and a hobby somehow, and maybe supplement it with some part-time work, most likely.
Great.
Probably realistically. But moving towards that sort of sphere of performance and art is really important to me. So I'm really throwing myself into any improv-related activity in London now as well, as I was before, but now with a renewed vigour, I think.
Excellent. You're also a member of Gamez?
Yes.
The third member of
The
Gamez?
third member, I believe, to be on the podcast.
Oh, I see.
Yes, not the third member. Not like Steve Rowe emailed us all saying, you are number one and
you are
number
Gamez
two.
the first, you are Gamez the second, and you are Gamez the third.
Yeah, I would feel bad for whoever would be number 20. There's quite a few of us. And I shan't attempt to list all their names.
No, do not do that.
Of course, no. Although I know all of your names, and I love you all in a very real sense. Not all of your names are in my brain ready to be used at all points, unfortunately.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
So what's it like being a member of Gamez?
It's really good. It's just a really committed group. It's really fantastic. The group is really just amazing. The enthusiasm for everyone to be present and contribute to it is really high. It's definitely very sort of co-creation in terms of the way that we run it. And if anyone has an idea of a new game, an old game that wants to be renovated, or something that they want to try, everyone's very able and willing to pipe up and say, hey, why don't we do this? It's not like Steve is a mastermind who is got us all on strings as puppets and we're just doing what he wants to do. It's a very open forum of where we should take the show, and there's also a lot of opportunity to try a lot of different things. This coming season we have 2 shows a week, which is really great. Mm-hmm. So almost half the cast will be involved on a weekly basis, and not just as improvisers, as a host for the segment, the Gamez segment, also as a tech. Previously we had a problem that we weren't playing games that relied on some aspect of tech, like microphones or lighting states or laminated bits of paper, which we weren't aware where they were sometimes, or using the projector or sound effects. We weren't using those because we weren't confident that a tech would be able to do it. And with quite a high impact and high energy short form set, we wanted everything to work.
Yeah.
Because often Gamez opens the night, so put your best foot forward first. But now we have a member of the cast, and we're going through training members of the cast as techs at the Miller to be able to support those more technical improv games. And there's also just an observer there to give external notes.
That's interesting.
Because a lot of times that doesn't happen. People train with maybe a coach, but the coach isn't there at every show to pick up on bits and bobs. But we are all our own coaches, but the coaches are always external to that show.
That's interesting.
Which I think helps them be a bit more, non-biased or have an objective sense of how it went.
Yes, and I think having that sort of process in place, it makes it easier to deal with than just, team members giving each other notes, which is just a complete no-no as far as I'm concerned. But if you've got one person and they are playing that role for the evening, I think that sounds a really good solution. I've not heard that before.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I would recommend it to anyone who is thinking, why is something sticky? Why is it crunchy? Have someone sit out and just watch, and then maybe another person the next show, and then compare notes and see if there's any commonalities, then that might be a sort of systemic issue with the show that you're running at the moment, rather than picking up on individualistic things, because some things just go wrong, or someone's not quite on the ball in that particular moment in time. But yeah, good advice by me. Thank you very much. Well done.
What's your favourite short form game to play?
My favourite short form game, the one that always springs to mind, is Arnie, and I think this was conceived at one of the Hoopla marathons. It's
a fertile ground for esoteric ideas.
Yeah. So the way this works is we reconstruct a movie, an abridged version, of course, that does not star Arnold Schwarzenegger, but all the characters in the reconstructed movie are played by Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Excellent.
And it's always very amusing, not only because it's ridiculous to hear Arnie play roles that he possibly couldn't or should never play. It's always fun to see what range of Arnie impressions people have, and how, also another thing about Gammas is how willing we are to give it a go and to fail. Everyone has this just complete sense of almost recklessness in their attitude to throwing themselves into games. We do practice them, of course, and that does ensure a sort of minimum level of quality. Everyone's had a chance to practice them, but if you're not feeling confident that you can do it, everyone is very happy just to go in there and give it a go, regardless of how competent they feel at what is required.
That sounds great. Cool. I recommend you get along to the Miller and check them out.
Yeah, Thursdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m.
Cool. You're also, is it artistic director of the nursery original? What's your official title?
Just a director of nursery original number 9.
Number 9. And the number 9 goes by the name of?
Behind the Scenes at Studio Mandelbrot. So it's being advertised for auditions. I know this is coming out on the Wednesday before the deadline. So if you haven't auditioned and you'd like to audition, you have until the end of this week, I think.
If you're listening when this comes out.
Yeah, so it would be the end of the week ending the 9th of September is the deadline. What is this? This is a show behind the scenes at Studio Mandelbrot. So it's a show within a show, and the show within the show inspires a standalone show. So let's let that sink in for a moment. So part of the Improv which will be at the Nursery Theatre is the setting of a BBC type organisation, radio, TV, film, a programming organisation that creates entertainment, and they have vast studios, and one department of the studio is they're creating a science fiction show, a radio play. So think sort of Star Wars or Star Trek or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was in fact a radio play back in the day. Think that sort of thing, and we're viewing the behind the scenes exploration footage of that. And so the writers, the directors, the voice actors, the sound effects artists, they'll all be going about their daily lives at the studio, and they might have interactions with people that inspires them to write that into an episode, because it's sort of by the skin of the teeth. It's made each week for that week.
Much like this podcast.
Yes. And so they go through this sort of writing process, and the second part of the improvised stage show will be the show within a show.
Excellent.
So that's called Asteroids. That's the working title at the moment, or the code name for the show. and asteroids is set on a bunch of asteroids, and it allows for a sort of anthology scenario, so different things can be happening separately on different asteroids set in the same universe but not necessarily having to overlap or be part of the same narrative structure, which is designed to be very freeing for the improvisers week on week as they perform these and devise them in the moment. And so there may be a table read scenario where they go through the script for that, the asteroids script for that week, or little vignettes of what might be inspired to be written by what's going on in the writers and directors and the studio people's lives at that point. And all of the asteroids content, the table reads and the little vignette scenes, they will inspire a standalone radio play which will be released at a later date.
Oh, right.
So the idea is it's a devised show,
Yes.
a devised radio play, where the devising process is also a show that is entertaining to watch.
Wow.
And a show in its own right.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. It took me a while to get my head around it as well, even though I'm directing it. And every time I explain it, I actually get better at explaining it. So, it's a really interesting idea, and certainly the sort of innovation that the Nursery Original program has allowed. And I think the people of London who are improvisers will do a great job in portraying it, because there's certainly a rich and a wide swathe of talent to be drawn upon.
Yes, I agree. What will you be looking for in the auditions?
The auditions, people who know the Herald, that's a plus. Who know sci-fi, that's a plus, but not necessarily the be-all and end-all. We're looking for people who are willing to try something new and to learn as if they had not learned anything before.
Nice.
Because this is going to go into quite a new ground. We're going to break into something that hasn't been done before, and so part of the process will be how far can we actually take it, and how far can we get to that sort of fully formed episode within the stage show. It may be the case that this is a horrendous idea and it should not be done, and we will have only very small snippets that then are woven together by my producer / co-director Robert Armstrong. He'll be heading up the transformation from the stage show to the finalised radio play, and also the way that we're thinking about the radio play is that potentially it can be built up to a greater level. So we may start as a radio play, but we then may underscore it with some visuals and animation perhaps to further illustrate it, and maybe move it towards even a sort of animated TV show series.
Wow.
If possible. But at the very least, it's going to be the radio play. That's the base level of production we can get. But who knows? The sky's the limit, potentially.
That sounds amazing. Where did the idea spring from? What was your first inspiration?
I didn't come up with it at all. So Rob Armstrong is his brainchild.
Oh, right.
And he told me all about the world of asteroids, and I said that's really awesome. And he then later on offered if I would like to direct this show, and I think that it comes with a certain advantage because I'm here to facilitate his vision. I don't need to worry about any of the thematic elements. I just need to essentially coach the team to perform a good improv show.
Mm-hmm.
And all elements of the theme and the content and what sort of world we create which is the world of asteroids, that's all decided by Rob, and then I interpret that and feed it back into the team. it's quite a good division of labour, I think, because it would be a lot to take on by one person, and that's why Rob offered for me to direct.
Cool, that sounds great. But this isn't the first nursery original you've been involved in?
No, that's correct. I was part of the cast of Castles in the Air, which was, what was that, sort of March time, I believe, which was a really great experience, really enjoyable. I do really enjoy Studio Ghibli, and it's sort of like a genre unto itself. Of course, it has elements of fantasy and sci-fi, and it's animated, but what it is so much more than the sum of its parts. It really has this very visceral magic, and to really get to grips with that is and then translate that into an improv performance was a really satisfying experience.
Cool.
We're done with the run now, but we are not done with Castles. So we're going up to the Birmingham Improv Festival.
Oh, brilliant! I'll hopefully see you there.
Yeah, we're playing in the evening of the 28th of October, which I believe is a Sunday.
Cool.
And it'll be really nice to have everyone back together.
Yeah.
We're already looking at other venues around the country, other improvisers who might want to have us over to guest. So look out on the Facebook page for more details if you still want to see more Studio Ghibli improv.
That's great, and I love the idea of getting out there and going to different parts of the country. I was up at the Birmingham Improv Festival last year and had a really great time, so I'm sure you'll have a very great time there too.
Yeah.
Cool. And one of the reasons we're recording tonight is that you have organised an evening with Izzy Sudek called We Talk Off Stage.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yes. So if you listen to Izzy's episode of the podcast, you'll be somewhat familiar with this.
I don't like to presume that everybody's listened to every episode.
No, that's true. So
that's how I get away with repeating the same stories.
Oh, yeah. So I shall explain once more.
From your perspective.
From my perspective, yes. So I have, for most of my improv life, found that there's a sort of funny thing to notice about some improvisers, that they're incredibly powerful and confident on stage, and then might be very reserved off stage when you've just finished the show or your jam and you're in the bar chatting. And I wondered, why is this, and how can they be so such an explosive personality on stage, and be so good at conversation there, and so willing to involve themselves, and yet be not quite so much of that as just their own person, their own personality. Not to say that there's any problem with this, but it does lead me to think, like, I wonder, I would like to know more of this person, because I'm sure they are, a very fascinating person, but they do have sort of locked themselves down. So sometimes it's difficult to penetrate into the sort of inner workings of someone. And I noticed at jams and at Duck Duck Goose, Thursday Night Lights, I would go and I would see the same faces a lot of the time, and I would feel very comfortable with them on stage. And also working at the nursery, I spend a lot of time with other improvisers as well, and all of these improvisers that I spend a lot of time with and consider them very good friends, I realised I don't actually know very much about them. I just feel very comfortable because we've been improvising for some time. So I feel like we're friends, and we are friends, but I just don't know what they do and what their other passions are, and about their family, and about the way that they think about politics or think about sport, if they support any particular charitable causes. All of these things that you don't really have. And I thought, well, what would be a good way to sort of access that? And that's to encourage improvisers to talk about things other than improv, because a lot of the time...
Oh, I mean, personally, I discourage that.
Well, here it's fine, because that's what people come here for. But to finish a jam and having done improv for 2 or 3 hours and watched a lot of improv, people then go to the bar and say things like, "Oh, well done, I really like that scene. That was really great. It was so funny." And then the other person would say, "Oh, thanks, I enjoyed your scene. It was really great. It was so funny." And then the conversation sort of ends and fizzles out, and it really just takes sort of a bit of an oomph from someone to get it going. And what do they all have in common? Improv. So they talk about what classes they've been on, what their little sort of personal philosophies are, and that's great. That's a really interesting thing. It's why we all do improv, to experience it all from every different perspective. But also I want to know more about the individuals, because I think then you would know them better as a person, especially in teams. You can learn more about a person, and that will result in more genuine and realistic relationships on stage, which
Definitely.
is my favourite kind of improv. And I'm part of a two-prov with Jewel Huck. We do Friends Anemones together, and that is our style of improv. Very realistic relationships, even if it's in an unrealistic context. The relationship is realistic. Always friends and concerned about each other and what's going on with them, rather than what we're doing right now. And so to help practice that muscle, this event, we've designed it. There'll be a bunch of questions that you can use to practice talking about things other than improv. So it's sort of like guided topics, as well as a bunch of group sort of inverted commas jam exercises that are improv games or scenes, but have a conversational context, like cocktail party or true life monologues, or an Armando sort of thing, but the scenes are not. It's more sort of like more of a monologue-y Armando, which I've termed the Armandon and on and on, where you do a little true life monologue, and that inspires. If it inspires someone, they can come and give another true life monologue, and then you might see a little sort of vignette of that, similar to a living room. Living room is also a good example of that sort of real life conversation. We're doing the first one at time of recording tonight, so at the time of distribution over the sound waves. It will be last week, and I hope it went really well.
I'm sure it did.
And that we planned many more dates. We concentrated very much on the first one and getting that right before we decided to program a bunch more in.
But I think it's a really interesting idea, and I think it's quite an original idea, and I think it's something that's very useful, because I tend to talk to people about improv, and yes, it'll be interesting having some tools or techniques to not talk to people about improv.
Yeah.
So,
even as a basic as question as how are you doing, and I don't want the answer, fine, thanks. That very sort of
strong and brave is what I go for.
Yeah.
Strong and brave.
You're feeling strong and brave.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it to catch on.
Strong and
It's
brave.
not really catching on.
I'll say it.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Strong and brave. I think for like a sort of time, taking up time perspective, people do usually just say fine, but then it becomes a bit of a habit. So to break that, when you are with someone and you have time to converse, just break out of it straight away, because sometimes even when you're talking with a good friend, you might just have a bit of 10 minutes of the first the beginning of your interaction might be very small talky, when you you do actually know each other quite well, you could just go straight into the big talk. And then hopefully that's what we're going to inspire with this event.
Cool. Is it better that people say I'm fine or that, oh, I'm really tired?
Oh, it's better that people say I'm really tired.
Yeah.
Because then I can ask, what have you been doing that's been making you so tired? Because if you say I'm fine, what have you been doing that makes you fine? Just, normal stuff.
Normal stuff. That's
And in fact, it's a lie, because you might be feeling really tired, and then you might think, oh, actually, I'm not fine. I am really tired, and then you're sort of back on track with the honest conversation, with the big talk.
Big talk. Cool. Let's have more big talk.
More big talk.
Let's go back in time. How did you discover improv? What drew you to improv originally?
I grew up. Not grew up, but I spent the sort of later years at school watching Whose Line Is It Anyway? Because that was on Dave, probably.
I should go, oh, I've not heard of this, because I'm forgetting everything that I've learned.
Oh, well. Everyone probably says, like, do you also, when someone asks you to explain improv, do you say, have you seen Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yes.
And if someone say yes, then, oh, good. So you've got a bit of an idea of, like, the tip of the iceberg, and that's a good jumping off point.
Yes. I generally tend to presume that people have seen it.
Right.
I tend to go, it's a bit like Whose Line Is It Anyway, but it's not always funny, because that's usually vaguely amusing.
Yeah, of course, because they can edit out the rubbish parts.
And it doesn't have to be funny. It often is funny, but it doesn't have to be funny.
Well, hopefully it makes you feel something.
Yes, that's a better definition.
Imagine that, an improv show designed to make you feel nothing. Ooh, weird. Okay, let's put that in the lock that away in the box. I watched this, and then I went to University of Nottingham, and I was looking through the lists of societies that I might want to join, and there was Improv Society.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, is that a thing that people can actually do and not just exist on television? And so I went, and I said, okay, so what's it all about? And they were like, have you seen Whose Line Is It Anyway? And I said, yes. And they said, we do that. And some other bits. And so I never looked back. I went to weekly sort of jam/hyphen training sessions. And in my second year, I managed to get into the performance troupe. We took a show up to the Edinburgh Fringe, which was called Death by Murder. It was really good fun. And then in my third year, I was the creative director of the troupe. So I got to take a show to the Edinburgh Fringe, which was called Time Smash. And there was other little shows we did as well. And then I finished in the summer of 2015 and came back to London and had a little bit of an improv sabbatical because I was working in a sort of awkwardly placed office. And but then I eventually finished that job and then started working at Borough Market, which is like 2 minutes away from a lot of improv.
Could not be more convenient.
Yeah, and then eventually started working at the nursery as well. So I have the sort of inside track of one of the improv organisations in London, which is really fascinating and interesting every day to be a part of. So I sort of had this sort of bizarrely self-taught sort of insular experience, which gave me a sort of grounding with a few bits missing, and then I've been, especially the 5-week course in Chicago, that sort of backfilled some bits that I was had missing from for a long time, but also reconfirmed with me some stuff that I was doing naturally anyway, and also reminded me of some things that I did know. So yeah, that's the main story.
Cool.
The condensed version. Yeah.
Brilliant. And you brought it around nicely. You started in Chicago and ended in Chicago.
Yeah.
Apart from I have a few quick fire questions to finish with.
Shoot.
So, are you somebody that finds improv books helpful? If so, do you have a favourite improv book?
Books being helpful, yes, they are. They are not a substitute for practice. I read the communal copy of Truth in Comedy when I was in first year at university, so 7 years ago. I've forgotten it all, so I probably should relearn it. And also, I don't have the context that I had now, so it probably will do a lot more for me now. So if you do have any books that you have access to that you read maybe a few years ago, maybe reread them. Maybe you'll pick up something new. My favourite book is Jill Bernard's Small Cute Book of Improv.
Yes, that's great.
It's only a £5. There are copies at the nursery, and you can also buy them online, and you'd have to pay shipping, but it will come direct from Jill Bernard, and she'll draw like a bunny rabbit or something in it. She's very affable. You can ask for whatever, and she'll probably do it. And it's a 30-minute read, and it has just a bunch of core concepts and affirmations that help with improv. It wouldn't give you any grounding if you didn't know very much or anything at all, but as a more experienced improviser, it does sort of help you realign your sights on some things that through all of your exciting adventures may have fallen to the waysides, and help you sort of home in back on some core concepts that really are very important. So keep that around and read through it maybe once every 6 months.
Yeah, it's really great book. Yeah, definitely recommended. What's the best or worst note you've ever been given when doing improv, and did you take it?
The best or worst note. Well, I've had very confusing notes, but it may have been because I was a bit new and I wasn't sure how to handle it. One note I got was, when you're in a scene, you want to know the other person, have an existing relationship. So that means when you set up the scene as you initiate, have that existing relationship. When I was a small baby improviser, I thought that doesn't make sense. I'm a shopkeeper. I don't know the name of this person. I'm not going to say customer Phil. So I didn't realize that, I should not have been a customer shopkeeper sort of interaction transactional scene in the first place. Right. So that note was quite amusing to me at the time, but now I have a sort of greater understanding. One of the most fantastic notes that I got in Chicago was from Gretchen Eng. The other teachers, who are all fantastic, were Rance Rizzuto, Gretchen Eng for level 2, then was Matt Higby, who was absolutely spectacular. Then we had Katie Klein, brilliant and so lovely, and Adel Rifai, who has had such a great mind. All great teachers, look up their things. And Gretchen gave me this note, which was never throttle any parts of yourself to accommodate for the understanding of an audience. So as an English person in America, I thought maybe I can, fit in and be more understood by saying things like sidewalk and store, rather than pavement and shop. But she, as soon as I did that, she said, be you and don't compromise on any part of yourself to make yourself understood to the audience, because then everyone will just be this sort of bland, same person. Whereas individual character quirks that come from your own self are what make such rich and deep characters.
Oh, that's brilliant. I've not heard that advice before. That's a great note.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, big final question. What's your signature move? What's classic Turnbull, saves the day, brings the house down? We knew he'd do that, and he's done it. Yay.
I don't know. Do I have any signature moves? Just trying to think of what I would end up doing. I think being okay to definitely coming out and doing a mime work, object work initiation.
Right.
So one that leaps to mind. At a Duck Duck Goose once, instead of coming out and having an opening line, I came out and started sharpening an axe.
Oh, right, yeah.
And that led to, as I recall, a good scene. So it must have been okay.
That's all we can hope for.
Yeah.
That we do a good scene. And
Yeah.
we must have been okay.
Hmm.
Thank you for being a guest on the Improv London podcast.
Thank you for having me. Yay!
I made this.
That's improv!